Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for attending. And thank you for coming into what might be a very slightly contentious issue for the Mars Society. Because I'm saying let's have a little intermediate mission before we go to Mars. But I'm happy to charge into the lion's den with what might be a contrarian message. I invite you to learn from my presentation. And at the end, I think we'll have some time for some questions. I'm the director of the Coalition to Save Manned Space Exploration, and my focus is on space policy, how to make the space program more politically viable, and so forth. And my premise is trying to explore or colonize Mars without first learning how to live on another world in the comparative safety of the moon would likely delay Mars landings and invite disaster. Why? Because it'll take a lot longer to test and validate everything with zero other world experience. I was watching the rover demonstration and talking in the other room and talking with the people who built the rover, and the thing that they were stressing is test. That there's so much time involved in testing, and so if our experience is limited to very dim memories from the moon, our experience in the moon, and experience on ISS with microgravity, and then going out into the desert and thinking, okay, this is kind of like Mars soil, and this is kind of like Mars temperatures, and you go down to the Antarctic or something like that. You can kind of simulate a lot of things. But going to the moon has always been, until very, very, very recently, the test bed for Mars. Going back in history, Wernher von Braun wrote up Mars plans that if they had actually come to fruition, we'd be on Mars now. His plans were going to, in the 70s, creating a lunar base to learn how to live on Mars, and then going to Mars in the 1980s. So we would be on like sort of the second generation Mars base with more and more people there, and the world may have turned out a little differently. So setting course on a 1,000-day journey to Mars without having learned to live on the lunar test bed is, as I said, a recipe for disaster. President Obama famously said, "We've been there, done that with the moon." He even said, "Buzz has been there, done that." Well, Buzz Aldrin said that the first astronauts to go to the moon, to Mars, will need to go to moon orbit first and assist in the assembly of modules to be landed while preparing that base on the moon. And they need to go down and stay on the moon for some time, maybe 6 months, before they come back to Earth. Now they would know what Mars is going to look like. Hopefully, they would understand most of the situations that can arise. And they've experienced that sense of detachment that from people back on Earth. They'll be the best trained crew to accomplish the mission. The moon will be the hub that will help get us to a permanent place on Mars. And Buzz, of course, has it totally correct because there's so much that we don't know. And there's black swans, too, the unknown unknowns, the things that we'll never know until it reaches out and hits us. Additionally, in my opinion, a cislunar space station would be another decade-long detour from Mars. And I don't think the public will be that thrilled about it, because it's not going to, from their perspective, look a lot different from ISS. It'll be sort of like the astronauts say, "We're here. We've arrived." And the public says, "Yeah, where? It looks like it did out the windows yesterday." And they'll say, "No, but we're here. We're at something called L2, and it's really fantastic. Let me tell you all about it. And look, we're running a rover on Mars, on the lunar surface from here." And they'll say, "Well, you couldn't do that from Earth." But that's some of the things that people have proposed for an L2 base. I think at some point that would be good, but with the budgets we have, and with the timeline that we should have for actually getting those first footsteps onto Mars, it'll be a 10-year delay, because it's not going to be a quick and easy thing to throw up, a Bigelow module in outer space at an L point, and it's going to take a long time to build it. It's going to take a long time to test it, and it's got to have life support. That's greater. So it would be, in my mind, a detour, and it would not be a training ground for actually living on the Moon or Mars. It would gain us radiation exposure knowledge, greater reliance on life support, but provide none of the lessons and benefits we'd gain from actually living on the Moon, and never landing anywhere. I've been in congressional briefings. I used to work on the Hill for a member who was on the space subcommittee, and I would have NASA briefings, and they were great briefings about the journey to Mars and this and that thing, and I would have various space industry coming, sort of offering, well, please do something with, we're building the Moon Mars rockets. We've got capsules, we've got all these things, and there's nothing from NASA and the White House coming that says what we'll do with them, except for, we'll go to a lunar orbit on this EM2, EM3 will go to lunar orbit, EM4 to lunar orbit, EM5 lunar orbit, and so forth. And so they've been coming, almost begging Congress, look, here's some things we can do, even without landing, some more cool stuff, like actually going to an asteroid instead of bringing back, a little piece of one. But what are some similarities between the Moon and Mars? Extremes of temperature. If you can survive on the Moon, you'll do fine on Mars. Extremes of radiation. Radiation shielding validated on the Moon will work on Mars. Habitat reliability and survivability. Will designs fail in a real other-world environment? Will protection from micrometeoroid damage be sufficient? These are the things you're not going to find out anywhere but on another world that has little or no atmosphere, that has dust that's been pounded to smithereens and microparticles for millennia. And in fact, that is another big thing. Abrasive fine dust that will pervade and stick to everything. On the Moon, it includes silica and possibly asbestos-sized particles. On Mars, it's dust laced with toxic perchlorates, perhaps in similar sizes. You can test a lot of that stuff here on Earth. You can simulate it, rather. Simulate it. But, and I've been down at Johnson Space Center. They've got this lovely room about the size of this room that's their lunar test bed, and it's got lunar soil simulant and so forth, and it's a and it's a cool place, but it's still not real other world experience. Water ice. This is the key for long-term habitation on Mars. And there is some detected on the poles of the Moon. So this is where we should learn how to successfully and reliably extract it and process it. It's one thing if you're on the moon and your water processor breaks down, or the water recycler breaks down. On ISS, that's dubbed, their nickname for it is yesterday's coffee is today's coffee. And but if it fails on Mars, you're out of luck. Yeah, because the window, just there's a 26-month window from here to go to Mars, and there's a 26-month window to come back. So you can't just say we're going home. The water processor broke, and we've run out of potatoes, and no, Earth's not going to be there when you get there. Now, one of the arguments for the asteroid mission is solar electric power, and I am a fan of that, and I've seen demonstrations. But and that would widen the launch windows, and it would increase the speed. So you would have more chances to come back if all the airlock seals blow out because you just can't get the clinging dust off of them. Lava tube caves, they're on both the moon and Mars and Earth, and perhaps those will be useful for habitation. EDL, of course, is different, but ascent and docking are essentially the same. Lessons learned in power, habitat, food, and life support will directly apply. Living in low gravity may have entirely different physiological effects than might be extrapolated from Earth and microgravity on ISS. Learning how to grow sufficient food in the real Martian world should not be left to those on a 1,000-day Mars mission to learn how. Failure would be fatal. How will plants grow in low gravity? We should not leave that to guesswork. How long will spacesuits last in real use, real otherworld use, with abrasive dust? You can't test that on ISS, and on Earth you can simulate it, but once again the simulations don't include a lot of unknowns that we won't really know about until we're on the ground. What equipment will break down in real otherworld conditions, and how often does it need to be replaced? That gets down to logistics, resupply, and things like that. You've got to plan those, particularly when you're dealing with 26-month resupply schedules. How will fire spread and fire suppression work? Coolant and other fluid and gas systems which depend upon or react with gravity might need to be perfected first. So as Buzz says, if we spend several years on the moon, only then will we be prepared to handle the greater risks on Mars, which do include perchlorates. The public reacts understandably horrified at space accidents. We've lost our shuttles in Apollo 1. The Soviets had at least one accident. Tragic failure on an initial Mars mission could end Mars explorations for a generation or longer. Thank you.
Chronicles, that's what happened. It didn't end it. Like Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. First 2 or 3 missions failed, but they did come back.
It's possible to come back. You know, one thing that I do lecture on is you've got to have more than one of everything. You know, when Apollo 1 had the fatal fire, if we didn't have a bunch of other Saturns in the shop being built, political pressure might have said, oh, this is too risky, we don't want to waste another $1 billion on making some more, and that might have been the end. Same thing with the shuttles. If we had one, if just Challenger was the only shuttle we had, then again, the political pressure, the bean counters, and so forth might have said, oh, I don't know, too risky. And again, with Columbia. but we had more than one. So, when we're ready to send the first mission to Mars, number one, we ought to be sending 2 rockets in the same launch window, either to the same or different spots. One will get through. And then you want to have that supply chain, more SLSs, more capsules, more habitats, more of everything, so that it is not the end, but rather the beginning. Eventually there will be, inevitably, fatal accidents on Mars or the Moon. We're very lucky that we've never had one on ISS. Somebody could have a heart attack or something just totally unplanned. There was a very critical situation. Was it about 2.5 years ago when one of the astronauts had water start to build up in his helmet? Yeah, and the way that in zero gravity that works is it tends to cling to things. So it tends to cling to recesses like your mouth, your nose, and your eyes, and then you can't see and you can't breathe. And that's not a pleasant way to go. And there's very little you can do about it. We watch science fiction movies, and wow, you put on your spacesuit just like that, and you take it off just like that. In 2001, you forgot your helmet, so you rush in and you push the button, and that closes the hatch and repressurizes it. If you're lucky enough, you might actually have that happen. But on ISS, you're out there, your helmet fills totally with water, and you start inhaling that, and because you can't get it off, then you probably aren't going to get back into the airlock, have it repressurized, and save yourself. So,
what if we just send robots first?
Do what?
What if we just send robots first?
Well, we do. We've got Curiosity and all of that, and sure, yeah, there was a proposal to put a sort of humanoid robot on the Moon and have it kind of wander around and pick up stuff and take selfies. Sure. Well, robotic exploration always is the precursor, and we've had many such things to Mars. And most of the plans for Mars involve in launch window A, you drop down your habitats and so forth and power supplies, and then they sort of fire themselves up, and maybe you have an android come out and unfurl the sails and do stuff like that, and you crank up the life support, and it just sits there sending back data to Earth about its reliability, and hopefully then it's in good shape so that then when we launch the astronauts in the next launch window, then you probably take some more habitat elements, but you've got some that are already on the ground that are working. Backups. Giant leaps challenge humanity. However, Neil Armstrong's giant leap was preceded by the many intermediate steps tested thoroughly on Mercury, Gemini, and the earlier Apollo missions, and robotic missions that landed on the Moon. We did not send John Glenn to the Moon in 1962 for many good reasons. This is a bipartisan thing. There's everyone. I've talked to lots of people in NASA, space industry, Congress, the public, and so forth. It is not a partisan issue that we should go to the Moon before Mars. And for example, Democrat Congressman Mike Honda said, "There's no better proving ground than the Moon for NASA to test the technologies and techniques needed to successfully meet the goal of sending humans to Mars by the mid-2030s." Now, as a practical matter, most observers believe the asteroid mission will expire on January 20th. There is very little love for it anywhere. And as you may have heard me in the debate the other night. And there's increasing pressure in Congress, and a lot of folks in NASA who say back to the Moon. And so I think that's what's going to happen next year, is we will see a repurposing. The next president will say, we need to go to the moon first, learn all these lessons, and then on to Mars. Now remember again, President Obama said, we've been there. We've done that with the moon. But that really is crazy. We were on the surface of the moon for only 300 hours total, over just 6 landings. We know nothing of the physiology of humans under low gravity, as distinguished from microgravity on ISS. The longest duration was Apollo 17, with just 75 hours on the moon. Apollo 11 was just 22 hours on the moon. And believe me, they were not studying, really paying much attention to, the effects of lower gravity. They were just trying to keep those guys alive, and the overall, there are so many factors in there. You're weightless for 3 days, 4 days. Then you've got partial gravity for a day or 3, and then another 3 days coming home. It gives you a very mixed thing, and they were probably, and they were all in great shape to begin with. So could you really tell? No, you couldn't tell anything. Some will argue we can just plot a line between 1G on Earth and microgravity on ISS and say with certainty that the adverse effects on eyes, bone and muscle loss, or even plant growth will be proportionately less than ISS. However, without real data points, that's not science. It's just a guess, and one perhaps even motivated by impatience. Impatience lost us Challenger. But we may find interesting things that we just don't know. Like maybe potatoes will grow twice as fast, and they'll take over the greenhouse in low gravity. So maybe that kind of thing. How fast do plants grow? We just don't have the data points in between the two extremes to know what it'll be. Or maybe they'll only grow half as fast, and in that case, if you want potatoes every day, like then you're going to have to pack twice as many seeds and have twice as much greenhouse space. That's, again, something you've got to plan. And if you just went straight there and then discovered that, you're making our Mars astronauts into guinea pigs. So these and other reasons are why I believe the first Martian astronauts are the guinea pigs for learning how to live on Mars, and it should not be that way. So the quickest path, therefore, to Mars is to have a successful research base on the moon. There's just an example from Bigelow of what they could do on the moon. And just as sort of a pop culture aside, skipping the moon is kind of like the missing key element in South Park's Underpants Gnome episode, where, okay, you get it. So it's the key element in making any plan work, is what's in the middle between your goal at the beginning and your goal at the end. So anyway, thank you all very much, and we have, I guess, a couple minutes for questions. Hand up right there.
I know you're a fan of the Mars Spotlight. So if you had a choice within a budget period, would you prefer to see NASA send humans to the moon, or would you prefer to see the Mars Spotlight happen first?
Well, the Mars flyby is something that could be done probably within some wide degree of the funding already approved and in process for the asteroid mission. You scrap that, you're not building the robot lander. You can do a lot of the life support work necessary to, and we're building SLS. We're building the habitats so for the transit. So that's sort of a we can do that. Getting us back on track for a lunar research base, I'd pick up the phone to Mr. Bigelow and say, what do you got? Yeah.
There's also that there are several launch vehicle providers, such as the UOAs, the most known one because of the press releases, but that, the companies are starting to work toward a functioning space economy where there's going to be infrastructure to allow for, cycling and, the ability to go to the moon frequently and have existing infrastructure that will be reliable to get people and equipment and infrastructure to and from.
I agree, and we will have that.
And then NASA
But-
needs a minor reality check
Yes.
to maybe allow implementation to use that to their advantage.
Well, a lot of those things are very infrastructure intense. So to my analogy is, the Wright brothers didn't wait for aluminum skin, and the B-17 bomber didn't have GPS. We will get those, but we're going to have to go there sort of the hard way with, to start, and then as industry picks up, then we'll have room for that. You, and then we're, I don't know.
I've got 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay, quick.
Do you have a landing site that you like?
Nope, but I'll take any, I'll leave that to, I'm not the rocket scientist in the room. I'm the political and policy guy, so I know there's some rocket scientists in here.
I think my frustration is we've already waited 45 years.
Exactly, what have we been doing? I do a lot of radio, and when I do a radio show, I'll sometimes pull this gag. I'll say, hey everyone, take out your phone, put it in your blender. Each piece you pick out of your blender, of your phone, has more computing power than the Apollo lander. So it's like, let's stretch our legs a little bit. Let's go back.
What would be your exit strategy? How long would we need to stay on the moon before we say, okay, we're ready to go to Mars, we've checked out all those things?
Well, again, I'll leave that to the rocket scientists, but I would imagine a period of several years. And you know what? At the end of that, I would then sell the base to moon mining companies or something. All right, so we're probably about out of time. Okay, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Contact info, savemanspace.com. You can always get a hold of me.